for everyone who stayed around so long. I know it's been a long day, so I'll try to make it light and quick. So my paper is called Making a Difference, the impact of NGO campaigns on deforestation in Brazil. And specifically, I mean, I don't need to explain it to this room, but tropical deforestation is responsible for 8 to 10% of global emissions. And Brazil has lost an area larger than the United Kingdom since 2001. And 75% of this is driven by cattle and soy. So that doesn't mean that you need to feel guilty for eating tofu. Most of this goes to animal feed, actually. So it's mainly driven by meat production. And because public enforcement is volatile in Brazil, NGOs try to fill a governance gap, but their real effect in empirical studies has so far not been evaluated. And why this matters is there's shrinking funding now for NGOs because of political opposition, because of Trump, because of Bolsonaro, also because of Elon Musk, which leads to them being not able to fulfill their role in providing supervision. So my research question is, do reputational campaigns actually change outcomes on the ground? And what this paper provides is like a first causal evidence that NGO reputational campaigns reduce deforestation and reshape agricultural land use at the municipality level. And what I do to examine this is I link 169 deforestation-related campaigns targeting 36 firms, which are handling most of the exports from Brazil to the rest of the world. So I have 3,520 Brazilian municipalities for this from 2012 to 2023. And I built a shift share exposure using predetermined trade shares and campaign shocks from an NGO. And with that, I estimate the effects on land use change, land use transitions, so transitions from either cattle to, from forest to cattle, forest to soy, or from cattle to soy, and on productivity. And a preview of the findings. So campaign exposure preserves forests primarily by reducing the forest to cattle conversion, which is like the primary driver. Usually the way deforestation progresses in Brazil is like either it's burned or logged and then cattle grazes on the grass. And after the soil has been used up, then soy usually moves into these areas. And an aggregate back of the envelope calculation of what area of forest has been preserved using not a general equilibrium model, but a very simplified extension from the reduced form shows that it would be 90% of sample forest in savanna that was avoided. And I also find evidence of land use reallocation. So when an area has already has already been depleted, campaigns accelerate the transition from cattle to soy. And this is indicative that because soy is more profitable for a given land area and they generate more revenue per hectare, this increases the productivity of the land. And then also, if the land use stays the same, cattle production intensifies and soy degraded over cattle pasture, but this recovers after 2 to 4 years. And these effects are concentrated in severe campaigns, so campaigns that are more severe in tone toward these companies, more internationally targeted campaigns, so campaigns that target the EU and the US, investor-oriented campaigns, so those that target funds or banks, and within municipalities that have primary EU and US tradings. Yes, please.
To defer this, you're going to get there, but can you say something about why, in the sense that is the campaign going to be something that we would expect to then drive increased enforcement, or that there's then regulatory pressure, or this is some CSR thing that they're worried about consumer preferences, or can you disentangle those from the nature of the campaigns?
I try to do that a little bit later on, where I go into the heterogeneity of these campaigns, and I will come to what an NGO campaign is also in a bit, where they either target consumers or investors. And when they target consumers, they usually go to brands like Burger King or Tesco or these kinds of supermarket chains for them, or fast food restaurants, for them to exert pressure on the sourcing firms, so like JBS or Cargill. But like to go to the exact channels, like this is something that I want to do later on, because right now I'm using a raw data set that has a registry of all the NGO campaigns. what the exact methodology that they use, I haven't done yet. So there's like larger documents of like 70 pages where they show like whether they had people on the ground tracking trucks. So this I haven't done yet. Briefly on the related literature. So on the impacts of NGOs, the literature has been primarily theoretical. Mainly the literature from Baron and Baron Diermeier, and the one that's most closely related is from Aldashef and Limardi and Verdier. And my paper contributes to this literature by showing the first causal evidence, extending or proving the theory from Aldashef yeah. And then on the empirics, NGO activism, there have been some empirical papers that basically show how NGOs target firms. So Hart and Koenig show that they do this primarily around big sporting events like the Olympics or Champions Leagues or World Cups. And Fioretti and Saint Jean show that they do this also before general assemblies. And then for the deforestation policies and commitments, there's been a lot of literature on the different drivers of reducing deforestation in Brazil. So on the one hand, corporate commitments like the soy moratorium and the G4 cattle agreement. And then on legal enforcement, largely by Assunção, has been contributing a lot to this literature. And also PhD student from here, Veronica Salazar-Stratton. And there I contribute to this literature by showing that alongside this legal enforcement and the firm commitments that NGOs can act as the third pillar of deterring deforestation. Going a bit into the background and the data. So what is an NGO campaign? NGO campaigns are public reports where NGOs basically try to trace environmental misbehavior to a specific firm. And the way they can do this, especially in recent years, because transparency infrastructure has been improving a lot, in Brazil most of all, is that they have individual property registries, the Cadastro Ambiental Rural, where you can see where individual properties are and to who they belong. And then you can overlay this with satellite images and you can see whether a given pixel has been deforested in this period when this person has been the owner of this land. And this has been happening more in the recent years because it took some time for this transparency infrastructure to be built. Before it was more people on the ground, so it was much more costly for NGOs to construct these kinds of reports. And the main pressure channels, as I mentioned before, are on the one hand consumer-facing campaigns where they target restaurants like big chains and supermarkets, or investor-focused where they target big banks or investment funds. I can maybe show a quick example of one of these reports, where here they're showing in the region next to Bahia, one of the biggest states, and here they're showing like, okay, they're infringing on indigenous lands, and they're basically blaming this individual property of trading with JBS, and then showing that they're linked to the big restaurants and supermarket chains. This, oh, sorry. You see the whole presentation. So yeah, here, I mean, it's too small to see here, but here they're basically showing these different firms and supermarkets. So the main data sources I use for this is on the one hand NGO campaigns. So SIGWatch is a commercial database which lists all NGO campaigns of in 180 countries from 2012 to 2022. It's tracking 19,700 companies across many different languages. From this, I get 169 distinct deforestation-related campaigns specifically targeted towards the cattle and soy sector. I have variables also on the sentiment, on the prominence and NGO power. Sentiment is basically the tone that they employ in these campaigns. When they say, for example, JBS is murdering the Amazon, it's a different tone than if they say like JBS is involved in trading with certain farmers that are involved with deforestation. Prominence is basically how much these NGOs try to promote these sorts of reports or campaigns, and NGO power, like just to have a ranking of that Greenpeace International is a bit more powerful than if you have a local NGO in Germany or in Brazil, for example. And I also get the investor risk consumer channel from this. And from the supply chains, I use Trace, which is a very granular trade database, which is especially good in Brazil again, which links individual municipalities to the exporters and to the destination to which they trade. This covers 95 to 98% of official volume, which has been confirmed recently in a paper by Dominguez Ino, who has been checking this. So I have data until 2023 for beef, until 2022 for soy, and I use the 2011 shares specifically and time-varying shares, because in the Borsiak literature, if you have panel data, you can also use the lectures. And then for land use, which is pretty standard, I use map biomass for Brazil. So it's 30 by 30 meter resolution. And I have data on transitions as well as the current land uses. So the campaign landscape over time, as you can see, so in the beginning, it was pretty flat until 2019, which then triggered a combination of Bolsonaro and the viral Amazon wildfires, which has also been examined in the literature. There was a viral moment where the Amazon was in the media a lot, and this reduced the fires. So this media attention reduced the fires in this period.
So I was going to ask you, how we going to interact with this NGO campaign you're interested on? Are going to be able to net out this
For which do you mean? For like the
letting this process out? So this was something that was very salient in the news all the time, etc., etc.
I mean, with the period fixed effects, I should account for this, no?
Okay, so then when you get there,
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure. I was wondering, like, how does this interact with the sharp changes in technology? Because I think there was this huge improvement in how they were able to detect illegal deforestation.
That was mainly before. So 2004 is when they introduced the DETER satellites. So this gave like real-time information on when deforestation was happening. It's been also examined in the literature by Assansal. So the empirical strategy, I have 3 core hypotheses. I have like a small toy model, but the main mechanism that drives these hypotheses is that expansion is more costly because there's a reputational cost that firms have to pay if they expand into forested land. And this reduces the extensive margin for these firms and pushes them to push a bit more into the intensive margin. The intensive margin can have two forms. So either they relocate the land from pasture to soy. As you saw in the beginning, pasture is mostly small-scale farmers who let their cattle graze, and soy is much more, generates much more revenue per hectare. So this is one channel of land intensity, and the other one is if there's an existing land use, if they increase the productivity of the given land use per hectare, this could also be observed. The shift share design. I'm using here is constructed by using the 2011 trade shares at the municipality in a given sector, so either the cattle or soy sector. And the way that you can interpret this coefficient is basically the share of trade in this municipality that is done with NGO targeted firms. And the way that you can interpret the coefficient is if a municipality would go from 0% to 100% trade with NGO targeted firms, what would be the effect? I control for the zero deforestation commitments, the IBAMA fines, for the priority list, several municipality characteristics. I control for firm size, because that's a big driver of NGO targeting, whether a firm is big or not. To unrelated campaign exposure, because it's a proxy for firm visibility, and the incomplete share control following the Borsiak Alanjara. And the regression is aggregated at 2-year level and area weighted to account for like that big municipalities count more compared to like a small municipality that might have.
And the outcome is?
The outcome is the change in land use. So the change in either forest cover, or the change in cattle area, or the change in soy area.
And why do you do it in differences and not in levels? Is there a reason to be delta Y rather than Y in levels?
In recent papers, it was like the paper that I looked at from Carrera, for example, they also used changes in deforestation.
So I just on Bruno's earlier point, the fires and sort of broader public salience issues, those are nationwide. There aren't sort of regional specific hotspots or something that could also show up at an MT level.
Yeah, I was thinking whether there would be some regional variation to maybe use it as an instrumental variable, but I think it was more like a broader attention in all over Brazil and not just this
fire.
exactly. Yes.
But you have in the control basically other policy confounders, right? Like buying percent.
Yes. What do you mean?
Like there might be like other conservation policies other than this campaign that can confound the reserve.
Yeah, but like I mean, these controls are pretty standard in the literature. Like it's usually there's not really controlled from much more than this. I don't know if so these were like the most known papers. So this is by us and South, the Deter paper where they were looking at like the increase in public enforcement because of the satellite cover. This has been evaluated a lot in the literature, and the zero deforestation commitments as well. So these are usually the controls that are controlled. So yeah, I'm following the Borosiak and Java literature on this, where I try to control for factors that might drive NGO targeting that are not related to deforestation. So firm size, how visible is a firm, as I mentioned before, and then their visibility based on the unrelated campaigns. And one reason why I want to convince you that this is plausibly exogenous is because a firm is trading on average with 700 municipalities. So these are huge firms, and whether one individual municipality misbehaves, this is not driving the NGO targeting. So from a perspective of a municipality, this is an exogenous shock. Also, many campaigns take months and years of prep, like the ones that I showed you in the beginning. They took 3 years. They sent people to the ground. They tracked trucks. They took photos from planes. So it's a long preparation, and then you also have this timing from general assemblies and sporting events, which drive NGO targeting. So I'm trying to control for all these factors by including weighted averages of firm size and unrelated factors. And what I verify is I do a lead-lag test, so that the leads are basically insignificant. I also look at unrelated campaigns, so campaigns that have nothing to do with Brazil, that have nothing to do with deforestation, whether they have any impact. And I also do a Rotenberg and leave one out decomposition to see whether individual firms drive the results, and no single firm flips this. So where does campaign pressure land? How am I on time, by the way?
12 minutes.
12 minutes? So yeah, you can see that there's not too much geographical concentration. This is like the year where the NGO pressure was the highest. So it's distributed for cattle, especially all over Brazil. Soy is a little bit more concentrated. And to provide some descriptive evidence first, so I'm grouping the municipalities into those that were most exposed and least exposed over the whole period of consideration. This is when the NGOs roughly start increasing their campaigns. And as you can see, they don't revert deforestation, so this is still a declining trend, but at the end of the period, the municipalities that were most exposed have 2% more forest cover compared to those that don't. So this is the descriptive evidence. I will go to the main results here. So again, what this coefficient basically shows is if a municipality would go from 0 to 100% exposure to NGO targeted firms, this would lead to a 0.6% increase over a period of 2 years. Given that the average municipality has an exposure of like 0.1, 0.15, this basically decreases this from 0.244 to 0.16. And given the combined exposures, when I combine these two campaigns, there's a coefficient of 0.5%. And NGO campaigns also reduce the expansion of cattle. So there's less expansion of cattle and there's less expansion of soy. However, given that soy is not really it's not really driving deforestation anymore. And you can also see that there's some indicative signs that there's some substitution from cattle campaigns towards the soy sector. And on the aggregate impact, wait, you had a question? Oh. On the aggregate impact, I basically use the betas that I found for in these regressions, multiplied with the exposure and the area of the municipalities to recover an estimate of how much forest has been saved over the whole period of consideration. And this gives roughly 90% of forest saved over this period, which is approximately the size of Belgium. The Amazon alone is 113 times Belgium, so it's not really like it's a sizable part, but it's not huge. And to put this into context with other policies, so the soy moratorium reduced deforestation by 80 to 90%, the priority list by 43%. There's different estimates. And this bundle of policies that were introduced in 2004 reduced by 56%. So the magnitude is sizable, but compared to firm commitments or to legal policies, this is much smaller. Yeah. Yes.
Just a quick question, because I can't wrap my head around it. I want to square this with your suggestive evidence from the very beginning, where you said like there are more and more campaigns in more recent years, right? But like the forest loss is like decreasing, so in essence that should lead to less campaigns, no? Because it's working. Or like how do you rationalize these two things together?
I will come back to that in a few slides as well, because I don't think the mechanism is you make an NGO campaign and then you're done and you don't need to monitor anymore, but the effect comes rather from continuous monitoring. But I will get to that in a few slides. So I do two placebo tests. On the one hand, the leads and lags. So the periods before the NGO campaigns are insignificant, and what's also striking is that immediately after. So here you see a slight increase in the impact on deforestation, but the strongest one is at T-1, and then it drops very rapidly afterwards. And the unrelated campaigns show no effect at all over time. So then I used a different complementary design where I'm looking at only campaigns that target I look at municipalities which have one dominant trading partner that trades more than 50% with them of the total freight on board. And if they have been hit by a campaign for the first time, how does deforestation in this municipality develop over time? And coming back to your point, if continuous pressure would be, so whenever you exert a campaign, then you save this amount of forest, then this would be linear and it would be going like this, but it's basically flattening out in the later periods. So the benefits come really from continuous pressure of the NGOs. Yes.
Yeah, I see it in the data as well, that they keep on pressuring on the same plots of land on the same municipality, or is it not visible? I don't know whether you have the data for it, right? So otherwise,
I mean, I don't have data on whether they're pressuring individual municipalities, right?
Yeah.
Like, I only have data on the firms. I'm really like I download a lot of the reports to see with textual analysis whether they're targeting individual municipalities, individual properties, and then maybe see whether I can.
But they keep on targeting the same kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The same firms at least, yes.
Yeah, okay.
But like depending on, so there's gaps always in between where they're targeting different firms. So coming to the mechanisms. So I also looked at the direct transitions. So what are the direct transitions from forest to other land uses or from cattle to other land uses? And I'm looking here specifically at the transition from forest to cattle, which is the main driver of deforestation, and this is also the main reduction in deforestation. So this is mainly responsible for the reduction in deforestation. And why do soy campaigns deter cattle clearing? So the soy moratorium basically bans any transition from deforested land after 2008 to cattle, and that's why soy farms cannot move into these areas that have been cleared by cattle farmers. And then looking at the transitions from cattle to soy more directly, I'm looking at municipalities now which have less than 10% forest to see what they try to or what effect NGO pressure has in these kinds of municipalities, because there's no forest to save anymore, really. So if I interact the soy campaigns with the low forest indicator, you can see that there's an increase in the transition from forest to soy, leading to more profitable land use in these municipalities. And then for farm productivity, this I'm a bit hesitant because I find it very difficult to distinguish cattle from grasslands from satellites. So this part I wouldn't pay too much attention to, but this is a bit more accurate. And there have been several studies that when cattle graze on the land, they acidify the soil, and then it's very hard for farms to move in and then transition this to a more productive land use. Especially the first seasons have like a drop in productivity. So this is 20 to 30% in the first season, but this rebounds in the periods afterwards. Again, this is like 10%, 15%, but if you multiply it with the average exposure, it's like 1%, 2% increase in productivity. Coming to some heterogeneity. So from the data set that I have, I can classify campaigns into more severe campaigns, more prominent campaigns, which is a geographic scope based on the language. What are the pressure channels, whether it's investors and consumers? And the most striking ones are that more severe campaigns, so those that are more striking in tone, are 69% larger. There's no significant difference, so the confidence intervals overlap, but the point estimate is larger. Then the geographic scope, if campaigns are targeted towards international audiences in English, they have a larger effect than if they're targeted mainly at Brazil. Investor campaigns have a larger impact compared to consumer-facing campaigns. And municipalities that are primarily targeting with the EU and the US also show a strong reduction in deforestation. And then looking a little bit at spillovers. So, I mean, most people know the Amazon, not too many people know the Cerrado, not too many people know the Mata Atlántica. So I wanted to see whether these effects are concentrated in like the most famous areas for natural conservation. And what you can see is like much of the effect that I find is driven by the Amazon. So there's 324 from municipalities. In the Cerrado, you cannot find any effect. In the Mata Atlántica, you can find a small effect on deforestation. But given the low baseline, this is negligible. And then I look at the cattle area and soy area in these areas as well. And again, in the Amazon, you can find strong reductions in the cattle area, and also from soy campaigns on the soy area. Whereas in the Mata Atlántica, all of these are increasing. And Mata Atlántica is a region that again has been mostly deforested, so this leads to a shift from the forest frontier to already cleared land, which is less controversial. So to conclude, how much time do I have? 1 minute. Okay. So NGO campaigns connect as the third channel of environmental governance, alongside public enforcement and private commitments. And these threats travel through the supply chains to the plot level, and this leads to a reduction in deforestation overall. They lead to more intensive land use, both by shifting towards more productive land use and to more productive land use of the same cattle or soy area, or a transition towards more productive land uses. And there's some evidence of spillover effects to already deforested lands. And the next steps that I want to have a look at is what role does the transparency that Brazil has, that for example Indonesia doesn't have. So the individual property registries and the textual lists of the reports. And then I want to look at leakage a little more granular, like not between the biomes, but also between the municipalities. And if you have any ideas how to do this, I'm very happy to talk. Okay.